Hi, and welcome back to the Suburban Chateau. My name is Stephanie Everett, and I'm delighted to have you join me on our 8-day trip north on the Rhine River. We started in Zurich and we're going to end in Amsterdam, but today we're starting to see the castles along the Rhine River. And of course, this is the part I was really looking forward to. The little princess in me couldn't wait to see all the castles that line the Rhine River. And believe it or not, the bulk of these castles happen when we were on the boat. It happened in just about an hour's time, traveling between all the castles on these mountainsides. And then at the end of that journey, we stopped near Koblenz in Germany and got to see the incredible Castle Eltz, which many say is the jewel of all the European castles because it's been in the same owner's family since the 12th century. So little has changed about this castle, and they managed to stay out of all the French-German skirmishes that many of the other castles along the Rhine succumbed to. So I cannot wait to share with you just the incredible time seeing just like all of these different castles and the light. As we were going down, it was in the morning, and I will never forget the experience of. Again, it was like being in a dream or a fantasy. You've seen these things in a movie or on TV, but the fact that you can see them in real life was quite exciting for me. And I'm naive. I get too excited, but it was literally just something I'll never, ever forget. So I can't wait to take you past the castles on the Rhine and, of course, to Castle Eltz.
We waved goodbye to Germania at Rudesheim and headed northward on the Rhine. And this stretch of the Rhine contains the bulk of the castles, and it's about an hour from the beginning of the castles and Rudesheim to Koblenz, which where we stopped next. The first structure we saw was the Mouse Tower. Now, the Mouse Tower was known because it was a post that was erected right on the Rhine that was used to control shipping by the Archbishop of Mainz. And he also commissioned this castle to be built, which is Ehrenfels Castle. Now, it is a ruined castle that sits above the Rhine Gorge, not far from Rudesheim. So the Mouse Tower is down below in the water, and Ehrenfels sits up on the beautiful mountain. And you can see the vineyards growing around Ehrenfels. And it actually has a grape variety named Ehrenfelser. And that grape variety, of course, is for wine. And it's named after the castle. Now, that castle was built in 1212 by Philip von Bohlen after the Archbishop of Mainz wanted a defensive structure built against Henry V, the imperial vicar of Franconia. The Archbishop staffed Ehrenfels Castle with Freeneys called Burgmannen, And then he also used the Mouse Tower below as a post to control shipping on the Rhine. Now, the castle itself was heavily damaged during the 30 Years' War and was finally destroyed by the French in 1689 during the siege of Mainz. Well, we very quickly reached our next castle, and that is Rheinstein Castle, which was built from 1316 to 1317. And it was a very important castle due to its strategic location above the Rhine. It was also controlled by various archbishops of Mainz. During the 19th century, it was purchased by the Prince Frederick of Prussia and rebuilt by castle builder Claudius Lassault. Prince Frederick of Prussia entertained many crowned heads of state here, including Queen Victoria. Today, the castle is maintained by the German government as a museum. We next encounter the amazing Reichenstein Castle, which is also known as Falkenberg Castle. The castle dates back to the 11th century. Unfortunately, by the 16th century, it was considered a ruin and was left to decay. But in 1834, Franz Wilhelm von Barfus bought the ruins and converted the tower into his residence. Later, Baron Nicholas of Kirch-Percelli, a wealthy industrialist, purchased the castle site and rebuilt the castle beginning in 1899. It was the last of the Rhine castles to be reconstructed, and today the castle is a museum that houses a large collection of historical weapons. Next, we were able to see the incredible Sooneck Castle, named from the nearby Soon Forest. Again, this castle was built in the 11th century to protect the surrounding area. But the castle was besieged in 1282 by King Rudolf I. He expressly forbid that it be rebuilt. But as with most of these castles along the Rhine, the castles were passed to different owners through the feudal system. In 1346, Sooneck was rebuilt by John Knight Marshall of Waldeck. But as the line of Waldeck died out, the castle fell into disrepair in the 16th century. In 1834, good old King of Prussia Frederick and his brothers bought the castle ruins and were going to rebuild it as their hunting lodge. After World War I, the castle became a possession of the state. Today, the castle is open to the public for tours. Our next castle is Heimburg Castle, which was built between 1294 and 1305 by the Archbishop of Mainz, Gerard von Epstein. Its original name was Honeck Castle. Various officials made their home there until the 16th century, when it began to fall into disrepair. Louis XIV finally destroyed the castle in 1689 during the 9 Years' War. In the 19th century, the castle was acquired by the Stinnes family, who renovated part of the castle in a neo-Gothic style. It is still privately owned and not open to the public. You'll notice that I've included a lot of footage of the area that lies between each castle. And that's because I was so impressed with the little towns that we saw along the way. Not only the architecture, but the beauty of each of these little towns nestled among the hills and of the vineyards of the Rhine. So you're going to see a lot of these little towns between each castle. Our next impressive Rhine River castle is Fürstenberg Castle. It is a ruined castle that lies along the Rhine that dates back to 1295. It was involved in numerous military conflicts and was destroyed and rebuilt numerous times during the early 14th century. It was finally destroyed in 1343. Castle Nollig is located near the town of Lorch. It was initially constructed around 1300 as a half-timbered fortified tower. Later in the 14th century, it was clad with heavy masonry. In 1936, the castle was purchased by Fritz Wild, a gemstone cutter, who lavishly renovated the castle in 1939. It's still privately owned and not open to the public. Stahleck Castle is a 12th century fortified castle whose name means impregnable castle on a crag. Stahel meaning steel and Ecke meaning crag. It was built on the orders of Archbishop of Cologne. It was destroyed in the late 17th century but was rebuilt. And in the 1800s, guess who acquired the castle? Yep, old Frederick of Prussia purchased it for his wife, who did not restore it in its entirety. In 1925, the decision was made to turn the castle into a youth hostel. And it took many, many years to turn that into a youth hostel. During World War II, it had different uses for it, but then it still is a youth hostel today. It's an amazing castle up high on a mountain. Ehrenfels Castle was built in 1220 and was used in conjunction with Pfalgrafenstein Castle in the middle of the Rhine that served much like the Mouse Tower early in the tour. It was a place where tolls were collected for passing on the Rhine. One of my favorite stories in researching for this video was a love story attached to this watery castle that we see in the video. There were two cousins, Emperor Friedrich Barbarossa and Duke Henry, the Lion of Brunswick, and they were living at the time as enemies. Now, Count Palatine Conrad was a loyal friend of the Emperor Friedrich, but was dismayed when his beautiful daughter Agnes fell in love with Duke Henry's young son Henry. The Count locked his daughter away in Pfalgrafenstein Castle, thinking she would be safely kept from her lover. However, her mother, the Count's wife, blessed the union and helped Henry to rescue Agnes from the castle by boat and marry her. The Count came back to check on Agnes after 9 moons, only to find out that she was not only married, but that he was a grandfather. The Emperor was ecstatic to hear of the union, and the cousins were reunited. Schonburg Castle was first mentioned in history between the years of 911 and 1166. From the 12th century, the lords of Schonburg ruled over the town of Oberwesel and had the right to levy customs on the Rhine River. The castle was destroyed in 1689, a really bad year for Rhine River castles, might I add, and the castle remained in ruins for 200 years until the German-American Rhinelander family bought it and restored it. The town of Oberwesel acquired it back from Rhinelander family, and it has been a successful hotel and restaurant since the 1950s. Next, we passed perhaps the most iconic feature on the Rhine River, the Lorelei. The Lorelei is a 433-foot-high, steep slate rock on the right-hand side of the Rhine Gorge, and has been known as an infamous maritime disaster site since the first records in the 10th century. Supposedly, the word Lorelei translates to murmuring rock, and this word comes from the heavy currents and a small waterfall in the area that creates the murmuring sound. Apparently, that sound reverberates off the rock and makes it even louder. Now, many legends exist that include a female character, and in a romanticized version of the story, she is a siren who lures sailors to their demise. Over the years, many artists have transformed the Lorelei story through poetry, statues, songs, and stories. But the beautiful Lorelei makes such an impression when passing it on the Rhine. The Cat's Castle is a castle that sits above St. Gorsenhausen along the Rhine River. It was first built in 1371 by Count William II of Katzenelnbogen. It was nearly destroyed by Napoleon in 1806, but was rebuilt later in the 19th century. It's privately owned currently and not open to the public, and is popularly linked with the Castle Mouse, which is close by on the Rhine. Rheinfels Castle is located just past Castle Katz on the left bank of the Rhine. It was built in the 11th century by Count Dieter V of Katzenelnbogen. This castle was damaged heavily by the French Revolutionary Army in 1797. While a large portion of this castle is still a ruin, some of the outer buildings have been transformed into a luxury hotel, wellness center, and restaurant. The Mouse Castle was constructed in 1356 by the Archbishop-Elector of Trier Bohemond II in order to enforce his Rhine River toll rights and to secure the borders against the Counts of Katzenelnbogen, who built Castle Katz and the Rheinfels Castle. Mouse Castle was never destroyed, but did fall into disrepair in the 16th and 17th centuries. The castle was restored in the early 20th century and today hosts an aviary that is home to falcons, owls, and eagles, and tourists can visit them from March to October. Liebenstein Castle was built in the 13th century and is tied directly to our last castle, the Stahrenberg Castle, which lies directly opposite to it and is the site together of the legendary story of the feuding brothers. Initially, the Castle Stahrenberg was the home of all the Stahrenberg noble lords, but this all changed when Knight Werner of Stahrenberg lived in the castle with his two sons, Henry, who was meek, and his younger brother Conrad, who was a fighter and a hothead. Henry was the heir and the favorite of Werner when a young lady came to live in the castle named Angela, and she fell in love with both brothers. She promised Conrad, the younger brother, that she would wait for him when he went off to battle on a crusade. A second castle was built in anticipation of Conrad's return and his eventual union with Angela, who spurned Henry, the older brother. However, when he came home, he had brought already with him a Greek woman that he had married on his travels, and the brothers never reconciled and instead built a wall between the two castles. Next up was our amazing trip to Castle Eltz. Castle Eltz is a medieval castle that is nestled in the hills above Moselle, between Koblenz and Trier. It is still owned by a branch of the House of Eltz, and is one of only a handful of castles in this region to have never been destroyed. It is surrounded by the Eltz Forest, which has been declared a nature reserve. The castle has remained unchanged throughout the many conflicts between the French and the Germans, and even survived the 9 Years' War, when many of the Rhine castles were destroyed. In the mid-19th century, Count Karl zu Eltz restored the castle and painstakingly preserved the existing architecture. And again, from 2009 to 2012, extensive security and restoration work took place, and they were able to replace the slate roof. It was an amazing experience to get to see one of these Rhine River castles up close and personal, and Castle Eltz did not disappoint. Between the incredible architecture, some of the interior post and beam style construction, it was incredible from every aspect. One of the things I connected to mostly when I saw Castle Eltz was just the incredible scenery that it provided. Nestled in the beautiful forest, I always will feel a connection to it.
Thank you so much for joining me on day 6 of our Rhine River adventure, seeing, of course, all the incredible castles right along the Rhine River, really only within about an hour's journey on the boat. And, of course, the incomparably magical Castle Eltz, and just a magical place to be, and to see a structure that is still in one piece after all those centuries. Just pretty incredible place to visit. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you'll stay along for the ride. We have 2 more episodes to go until we reach our destination in Amsterdam.